Okay, so I think we can start right now. My name is Tomasz Rychter and I'm a web applications developer at Media Regionalne. And today I would like to talk about VAGRANT and creating optimal development environment. But before we start talking about VAGRANT, I would like to talk about some obstacles that we face during our daily work. I think that either you are a freelancer or you are part of a development team, during your daily work you can face some problems, like, for example, quickly going back or switching to other project. For example, if you are a freelancer, somebody is calling you that you should make some changes in his project and you are already working at the other one. If there is the same version of PHP, MySQL or any other stuff, everything is fine. But when there is a difference between, for example, PHP versions, you need to remember what was the version proper for your previous project and switch to it, and then starts the problem. And the bigger project is the bigger problems you will face. Another problem is when you are part of a development team and you are working on more than one application at a time. For example, at Media Regionalne we've got multiple services and there is no possibility that one developer is working only with one project. Anybody needs to work with more than one. And often it happens that somebody from the business team is coming to us and saying that we should start quickly working on some extra Google Analytics code or something else in their project because it's important, and then we need to stop our current work and switch to other project. Also, when you are part of a development team, you sometimes ask your friend to do some work for you because, I don't know, you are going for a sick leave or you are going for a vacation, and okay, there is no problem to code some PHP, but there is a problem when your application needs some extra configuration. Of course, we've got a wiki database in our company, and we've got all of the steps needed to run the project inside our wiki, but problem starts when somebody was changing this configuration and forget to update wiki, and believe me, it happens more often than we want to have happen. And another thing is working with multiple machines, because for example, I myself work with Ubuntu machine at work. At home I'm a Mac user, and having environment up to date and running on multiple machines and taking care of the proper versions of each of these machines, it's quite complicated, especially when you are going to add extra machines to your environment, because, for example, you are buying a new PC or something got broken and you need to update configuration and your environment quickly. Okay, but enough about the problems. Let me plant the idea of, okay, before we will plant the idea. Also, it's quite annoying when somebody is forcing you to work with the development environment which you don't like. For example, I'm a heavy Mac user, and for starters, when I needed to use Ubuntu to develop at work, I was pretty annoyed that that something is not working as I am expecting, and it would be very nice to have possibility to work with the IDE and with the programs that I want, not with the programs that everybody is working. And as it is stated here, forcing developers to use the same tools is going to lead to problems, reduce productivity, and promoting nerd fighting, because someone uses V, somebody else not. Okay, but enough about the problems. Daily problems. There is one, and the biggest problem of all of them works on my machine, because when you are asking your colleague to start working on the project and he's saying that everything works, and after a couple of days you are coming back from the vacation, you are starting to test the code which he produced for you, and now nothing is working. There is a problem. Who's to blame? Whether it is because the configuration was wrong, or whether your colleague was not helping you in a proper way. But okay, enough about the problems. Let me plant an idea of a better environment in your hands. Let us think about an environment which will be nice and fun to work with. The environment which will be nice and fun to work with, I think, should have such additions. For example, everyone can use OS and tools of their choice. Also, development can take place on any machine that developer has access to. So when you are away from your office, or when your PC got broken, it would be nice to not waste time to setting up your whole environment and start working on a problem. Not waste, I don't know, 4 or 8 or even more hours, depending how big the application it is and how many dependencies it has. Start just coding and doing your work, especially if the deadline is near. Another things. Switching between environments is simple and doesn't require extra amount of work and time, as I said before. Also, it is possible to go back to configuration from any time in the past without wasting endless gigabytes of disk space. Especially if you are a freelancer, you are working with, I don't know, 10 or 20 or even 30 projects a year. Each of them may have different configuration. And for example, after 3 months or after half a year, your client is going back to you and asking you to make some changes. And now you don't remember what type of PHP version it was working on, what type of libraries was needed to work with this project. Of course, if you are a person which is quite good organized, you've got a list of these things, but this also takes time to have such lists. And also it takes a lot of self-discipline to have this list up to date. And it would be, I think it will be much nicer if you have some instruction or some possibility to go back to the environment on which you were working with this project in no time and without needing to go after in your memory and remembering what version of software was needed to work. Another thing, no need for caring about the same LAMP configuration on each machine, as I said before. Keeping your IDE and your environment working the same on Mac and LAMP at the same time is really painful sometimes, especially with some libraries which are a bit different for each of these systems. Also, quick and easy bug replication process. This is very important when you are working in a development team. When you are, when somebody spots the bug, it's easier when you have possibility to quickly reproduce this bug and to start working on it, because there is nothing more irritating than trying to find the bug which your colleague can reproduce each time, and you cannot have this bug reproduced in an hour or two. Also, the good environment, which will be fun to work with, would be an environment where nobody can say that it works on my machine and it is not working on your machine. It is your fault, not the fault of my code. So, is there a way to accomplish these things, to have this environment which is fun and easy to work with, to have the environment which you can share with your colleagues, or for example, if you are a developer, to share it with your designer, so he can work on your application and design files without knowing how to configure whole environment. It is a possibility to do that, and the tool which allows us to do so is VAGRANT. VAGRANT is a tool for building complete development environments. It is basically a command line shell and Unix scripting interface written in Ruby, which is open source, and most often people use it with VirtualBox. It is a tool which allows us to create virtual machines with VirtualBox in no time. And these VirtualBox machines are even running by default without GUI of VirtualBox. It is a quite lightweight solution, and what is more important, you are doing everything from command line interface, so it allows you to use shell scripts. And VAGRANT is quite new. Developments of VAGRANT started 3 years ago, but already it is trusted by some big companies like Disqus, BBC, Mozilla, or Nokia. Okay, I will go to the specifics of working with VAGRANT in a moment, but having a tool which is allowing you to quickly create a virtual machine is one thing. But then you need to customize this machine to work with your application. And that's the situation when VAGRANT is not enough. You need to connect it with something, and you need to do some extra amount of work. And this work is called provisioning. It is a set of actions to prepare an environment with appropriate software and data and make it ready for work. So basically it means that when you have your virtual machine configured, then running, you need to do some extra work to have the proper environment. For example, download and configure some libraries, set up database, set up proper version of scripts, permissions, etc., etc., or maybe even users. And VAGRANT comes by default with possibility to provision virtual machines in 3 ways. First and easiest way is shell scripting. It allows you to provision a VAGRANT machine only by using normal shell scripts. And the other 2 ways are using special provisioning tools. First of it is Puppet, and it was first tool for provisioning connected with VAGRANT. And second one is Chef. And both of these solutions, Puppet and Chef, come in 2 versions. They come as very big servers to which you can connect lots of the machines and work with them remotely. As for example Chef, they come in smaller version called Chef Solo. It is a version it is also open source, and it is version that allows you to work and provision your system without the need to connect to some external server. Everything runs on your computer. And a few words more about Chef Solo. Sorry. Chef Solo is an open source, as I was saying before. It allows us using cookbooks. And what are cookbooks? Cookbooks are containers that hold 1 or more recipes, templates, configurations, etc. That allows us to accomplish some task, for example, installing MySQL. And recipes are collections of the instructions which are going to make things work. So when you need to install MySQL, or you need to create some database, or etc., etc., you need to prepare them to work with your environment. But these things also, like configuration of VAGRANT, is made by Ruby. But I'm not going today to go into specifics how to do that, because we've got Project Vagrant for Drupal. And this is Project Vagrant for Drupal. You can download it from drupal.org. It is not a module which you install in Drupal. It is a project with pre-configured cookbooks for chef and pre-configured solutions for Vagrant that allows you to quickly create and reproduce environment which is allowing to develop via Drupal. So now we will stop the presentation and go to terminal to see how we should do it. Okay, but what are the requirements to start the process? First of all, we need to download and install VirtualBox. It doesn't have to be some specific version. The newest is okay. Next thing is to download and install Vagrant. In Ubuntu, you are just need to do sudo apt-get install Vagrant. When the okay, I will try to show you my console. Okay, when Vagrant is up and running, you can type vagrant/h in your console and see the list of commands allowed to use with Vagrant. One quick hint: if you are installing Vagrant on Ubuntu, by default you will see error or that states that the Vagrant is not installed. It is because you need to add a path to your .profile file to make Ubuntu see your Vagrant. But okay. I think it is quite straightforward installation process. After you've got your Vagrant, you need to download this project Vagrant from Drupal.org, unpack it, and prepare some directory for it. I already did that. Inside this project, there are directories with cookbooks, with the most important thing for Vagrant, which is called Vagrant file. It is Ruby file which has all of the configuration needed to run Vagrant and to prepare your machine. Even if you don't know Ruby, it is quite easy to do something with this file. When you are preparing Vagrant, first thing which you need to have is the base, because creating a virtual machine from the scratch would be quite time-consuming action. So every Vagrant in machine is based on something, and by default, author of Vagrant is giving us something called boxes. These are pre-configured. Oops, presentation effect. Okay, we are back. Boxes. Boxes are pre-configured instances of virtual machine. They are base on which you are building your own version which you need. So you need to download such box, and you are doing it by first telling Vagrant what box you need, and you're doing it by like that. I will escape from it. What I'm now doing, I'm telling Vagrant what box he can use to prepare virtual machine for me. Previously at home I had downloaded some box prepared by the author of VAGRANT. Later on I will tell you a few places from which you can take pre-configured boxes, because you don't have to use only boxes based on Ubuntu. You can have boxes based on CentOS or any other distribution. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is I'm telling VAGRANT to add to his list box, which will be called, for example, base. It will be main box which I will be using, and tell VAGRANT where he can find these files for this box. So in my case it will be like that. After this command, VAGRANT knows from where to download the basic files. You can always check what boxes are already available for you to start creating virtual machines from it by doing VAGRANT box list. And as you can see, I've got already 4 boxes from which I can start building virtual machines. This is my base box and boxes with other distributions of Ubuntu. Next step which we need to do to start VAGRANT, we need to, inside VAGRANT directory, we need to create a directory called public. It is a directory in which we will be storing files which are shared between our machine and virtual machine created by VAGRANT for us. And this is how the process of working on your application works. So, you've got your files downloaded from a repository, or your files on your PC on which you are working on, and these files are automatically synced with your virtual machine. So whole scripts are not run on your local host, but they are run inside from inside VAGRANT. Okay, when we've got this public directory, we need to modify our VAGRANT file. It is a bug which is currently under development. We need to add that kind of line. And this is a line which tells VAGRANT that we want to share our public folder with the folder on the virtual machine, and we are changing the owner of this folder or directory. Otherwise, we will have errors connected with the file owner permissions. Next step is to modify our on our host machine, our etc files. Oh, sorry. And we need to add line which is telling that if VAGRANT asks, if we are asking in our web browser for drupal.vbox.local, it is going to go to current IP address, and this IP address is also in VAGRANT file. Okay. And that was the last step needed to configure our VAGRANT machine. Now we can start VAGRANT by command vagrant app. And as you can see, First, Vagrant will run script from Vagrant file, and after this script ends his work, Vagrant will start provisioning using Chef. On my machine it takes about 7 minutes, so okay, we can see what, I hope it will work here, but for a moment I was asked to ask some questions to the audience and gave some caps. So my first question will be, so you can see that Chef provisioning tools started to work and started to check what things he needs to prepare inside our machine. It was PHP, Apache, and Drupal, Drush, etc., etc. I was doing it before because I was afraid that because of problems with the internet here, it won't work. So that's why everything went quite quickly and is working, except this information that Chef never successfully completed, but it is not true. I think it is some kind of a bug. We can check whether Vagrant is working or not by Vagrant status. Yes, our Vagrant configuration is running. And now, by using Vagrant SSH, we can log inside our Vagrant machine. And it is last step of configuration new virtual machine. We need to, as a sudo user, as a sudoer, we need to make post-install script. And it also takes time. It is doing some extra maintenance, which is needed after first configuration. Okay, so my first question will be, do you know any other projects which are connected with Vagrant and Drupal, both? Okay, so I will tell them. I will tell you about them later. So don't worry, because there is one big project connected with Vagrant and Drupal. Okay, so another question, maybe easier. Who can name one company which is using Vagrant? Okay, in blue blouse.
Nokia.
Okay, very good. One cup goes to you. Somebody will take that, yeah, okay. And 2 cups left. Okay. Maybe somebody knows if Vagrant is working with some other types of virtualization software. If so, what type of software it is? Yes, very good. And it will be tricky because there is third software that you can run with Vagrant, and it's cloud-based, I can tell, and it's also provided by the company which has a very big bookstore. Yeah. Yes, it's Amazon Web Services. You can also use Vagrant with Amazon Web Services. Okay, here we don't have so fast internet connection, so I think it will take still a few minutes to end the configuration. But meanwhile, we can go to the rest of the presentation, and I will show you running the Drupal configuration later on. Tips and tricks. Okay, so I was asking about the other project which is connecting Vagrant and Drupal, and this project is Vagrant, and it allows you to use Drush in connection with Vagrant and run commands and manage Vagrant machines via Drush tool. And another good thing to know is boxes sources. First source, which is official source from the creator of Vagrant, is under first link. And there are only few boxes with the two latest stable long-term support releases of Ubuntu, 32 and 64 bits. And much more Vagrant boxes pre-configured are available under the second link. But there is one thing which you need to remember. They are not tested and checked by the author of the Vagrant. They are tested by the community. So you may experience some problems with working with these boxes. And the third and the most interesting thing is a tool called VV. And it is a tool that allows you to create your own boxes. So for example, if your company in which you work, it needs some very specific configuration of the software, you can prepare it via VV and share with your colleagues. And okay, I hope we can go to Vagrant and see that it is working. Still it needs a bit of configuration, but I think it is now going to end in a few minutes or even less. Or maybe not. But okay. What you can do. After this post-install configuration ends up, you can always go to the URL which we stated in our etc hosts file, which is drupal.vbox.vlocal. Okay, And okay, despite the problems with the connection, because it is not, the configuration is not ended, if you will, just after your Vagrant is up and running, if you will go to this address, you will experience another problem. It will be problem with database. It is because by default, this project it needs from you to install Drupal. So first, you need to go to URL drupal.vbox.local install PHP. Then install Drupal, but it is this installation is pre-configured. You don't even have to put your database data. Everything is already in files. And after this installation, you can work with first Drupal website. And okay, one website is fine, but what if you want to work with another website? It is also quite simple to achieve. I will show it to you on an example. First step is go to etc hosts file and prepare another line which will be telling where to find our another Drupal website. Then we need to modify Vagrant file and also add this URL to another Drupal website. After that, we need to restart our virtual machine, and you can do that by just going to command line and writing vagrant reload. After that, you need to use SSH, vagrant SSH, and download a copy of Drupal into the folder which name is the same as the URL you were placing before in etc hosts file and in vagrant file. And after the download is completed, you can install another instance of Drupal. Also, you can use Drush to it because Drush is also pre-configured inside this Vagrant project for Drupal. And a bit also about Vagrant and working with Vagrant for the end. You can, when you, Vagrant, as I was saying, is by default running without any VirtualBox GUI. So you will not see in your VirtualBox, I will open it, anything. It will not run. Or you can only check it by writing Vagrant status in your command line. Also, what is important, you can check this status of if your Vagrant machine is working, only if you will go to the directory in which Vagrant is installed and in which its Vagrant file is placed. Because if you will try to run Vagrant status in directory without Vagrant file, you will get some error and you will not check whether your Vagrant installation is working or not. And when you've got your Vagrant machine working, then you can do with it three things. First thing is to suspend it, Vagrant suspend. If you will suspend Vagrant, it will be it's the fastest way to go back to work, but it still consumes part of your RAM memory. You can do Vagrant halt, which will halt the machine and free the RAM memory, but still copy the data from RAM to your hard disk, and will still take some parts of your hard disk. And if you don't need Vagrant and this instance on with which you are working, because, for example, you have ended working on that particular project and you are not going to start working with for a month or even longer, you can just do Vagrant destroy. And in this case, you are removing all of the files and data from your PC, and only you've got Vagrant file and configuration to start with it from the scratch. So it will take some longer time to start working on it, but it is not using your data. Okay. So as you can see, my Vagrant instances are also visible in the GUI, but by default, and you can change it in Vagrant file, they were not seen in the GUI. Okay, so we can go back to the presentation. Any questions?
You showed the public folder which has these shared files with the host machine. How about permissions and the owner of these files? Because in VirtualBox has some quirks about that, and how does it work in Vagrant? How does it?
I was also afraid that when I was starting working with Vagrant, I was also afraid that it will be a problem. But if you remember to create this public directory, and in Vagrant file you remember to add this permission for www-data to it, it is working without any problems. You can copy files, they are shared and synced via Vagrant scripts and via VirtualBox configuration, which is not making any problems, which is quite...
So this is synced, or this is the shared folders functionality of VirtualBox?
It is shared, and you need to have VirtualBox add-ons installed to have it working. But good thing about that is VAGRANT is pre-configured to install these VirtualBox additions, so you don't have to remember about them.
Okay, great, thanks.
Another question?
What happens to the database when you do a Vagrant destroy? Is it gone?
It depends where you store your database, because you can configure it to store it also in this shared folder, or you can configure it that it is only inside your Vagrant machine. And for example, and as a case study, we, for example, when we work on database, we are downloading the newest version from the external server to the virtual machine. So we don't have such a problem, because we are testing our applications on some data which are taken from the production, downloaded, and on this real data we are working, and we don't need them after we stop working. All the configuration data is stored on your host machine. Yes?
And what is the performance of this solution? Because you run a virtual machine, so it takes some resources to run it.
Yes, okay, I can show you my system monitor. Right now Right now it looks like this. So there is 1.7 gigabytes of RAM used, but for the virtual machine it is stated in a Vagrant file that I will use only 300 megabytes, and so it works quite fast, because you are not using VirtualBox GUI, you are not using X server, etc., etc. So unless you don't develop very big application inside this virtual machine, you are quite sure, you can be quite sure that it will not freeze or eat all of your RAM. For example, when I'm running our applications from Media Regionalne, so like for example Regiomoto application, which is a part of a bigger solution with almost over 200 Drupal modules, I need 1.5 gigabytes of RAM to run it smoothly. So I must say it's not too big concerning today's standards. Any other questions? Okay, so harvest your crop, and thank you very much for your attention.